our distinguished guest, Dr. Ahmad Zayadi, and Dr. Muhammad Noor, Dr. Akmal Salim, and our distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Now we are moving to the next session. We will discuss still about the same thing about eco and the worship place, and especially about the masjid. And special for this session, we will discuss about the principle and international best practices in the implementation of eco-friendly houses of worship. How we want to make we call it in the religious term, maybe for the masjid, they want to make the Jannah in the masjid. So the most beautiful, safe, and a good environment of the best environment in the place of the worship in terms of the ecology. So Bapak Ibu sekalian, sesuai dengan permintaan, sebagian nanti akan saya ringkaskan dalam bahasa Indonesia. Dan nanti silahkan apabila ada pertanyaan dalam bahasa Indonesia dipersilahkan dan kemudian saya akan menerjemahkan tentu dalam bahasa Inggris. And now we have four special guests. Some of the speech have been recorded, and one will be delivered online, and one will be delivered directly to us today. So most of the speakers here have a very long experience in the social activities. And for the first session, we'll invite Ms. Ruth Rubber she is a social activist. He has experience in NGO professional with over 25 years of experience in humanitarian relief and international development sector. So he is, I think he is still in Brussels, in Belgium. So for Ms. Ruth Faber, the floor is yours. So can we see the Zoom, put it online, so in front of the podium? Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Can we connect it to the main screen? Can you connect it to the main screen? Wait seconds, Miss Ruth Faber. Yeah. So that the audience can see you. So. Sudah. Masih belum? Ini pindah ke, oh ya, nice, perfect. So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and please let me know if I'm speaking too fast or if there's a problem with the connection. So as you mentioned, my name is Ruth Faber. I'm CEO of a network called EU Cord. But I'm here today because I'm one of the representatives for HARD on the We Care work stream. And the We Care work stream is concerned with the climate and environmental related sustainable development goals. So that would be water and sanitation, climate action, life below water, and life on land. But I am speaking to you today rather more from my own Christian experience and the tradition of the Anglican Church and how the Anglican Church has been working towards making its buildings and activities and places of worship more eco-friendly. So it is my hope that some of my reflections will help you in your own reflections as you take this forward with your own places of worship. I'm going to start with a little overview on the journey that the church has taken in terms of its environmental stewardship. I'm going to say a little bit about Eco-Church. Perhaps, if I have time, some of the changes that we experience in trying to move towards a more eco-friendly approach, and then some examples of the ways in which our churches are trying to comply and make the shift. So I hope that if I follow that structure, I will meet the aims and objectives for this session. So the Anglican Church for many years has been concerned with issues of social justice. So even if you would come into a church 50 years ago and you were to have tea or coffee, then it is likely that that tea or coffee would be fairly traded. So this concept of social justice has been quite well embedded, and in recent years, environmental stewardship is more and more integrated into the life of the church. I think it's interesting to start with a little reflection on where this drive for change comes from, because I think that, especially in terms of environmental issues, a lot of this drive really came from the grassroots. So the people who are sitting in individual congregations who were interested in ecology and creation care started to push the hierarchy and the church governance to make more formal commitments in terms of its environmental care. And so what you see is a grassroots, bottom-up request and desire, and then that's met now with somehow a top-down also approach with various sort of, how do I say, not so much rules, but let's say guidance and laws that the church has put in place that now the churches are to follow. I want to say a little bit about Creation Tide, because Creation Tide is also what we call the season of creation, and it runs every year from the 1st of September to the 4th of October. So there are many Christian church traditions, so Roman Catholics, Anglicans, Protestants, and the Eastern Orthodox Church observe this time for prayer, reflection, action, and thinking on ecological challenges. So it starts on the 1st of September, and as I mentioned, it ends on October 4th, which is the feast day of St. Francis of Assisi, who is the patron saint of ecology. And this is an important moment for the church because it acts as an important touchstone and reminder for the whole church on the need for creation care and to take our environmental concerns seriously. As I mentioned, the Church of England has made a number of environmental commitments. I'm not going to run through them all, but maybe some of the most important ones. So going back to 1984, the church...
Tolong koneksinya di... Ms. Ruth Faber, are you still with us? Ms. Ruth Faber, jadi tadi menjelas.
Oh ya. Of other moments, I want them specifically. So in 2019, church buildings, the housing for our ministers, and travel. So you can imagine that when this commitment was made, it really meant that all our churches, all our work, we really had to think about and assess and look at how we were going to meet this net zero target by 2030. So if I move on a little bit, I think that one of the tools that we have used to help us sort of on this journey is the Eco-Church scheme. So the Eco-Church scheme is run by an organisation called Arosha, and this organisation works on environmental programs in many countries around the world, but they launched this scheme to help churches with their sustainability efforts. And as churches work through the scheme, they can receive bronze, silver and gold awards. And we actually will get a physical award that we can put in our churches, and this helps to show that we're part of the scheme, and it also helps to motivate congregations and people to participate. What's interesting about this program is that it covers a number of really important areas. So it covers worship and teaching, so incorporating creation care themes into sermons, prayers, all our teaching programs and our children's programs. It does concern the buildings and encouraging energy efficient improvements such as insulation, renewable energy and water conservation. It includes reflection on how we use our land, promoting sustainable use of church land through wildlife-friendly gardens or community spaces. It looks for community engagement, so how does the church work outside of its own immediate environment? How do we work in our broader communities and helping our broader communities to adopt sustainable habits? And the last area of work is around lifestyle, so encouraging individuals in the churches to make more sustainable choices in their personal life. And I think this is a very nice framework because it doesn't just focus on buildings or just on energy, but it also looks at lifestyle and it looks at how we work and engage in our communities. And I will share a link which you can have in the document package later, which will share some ideas of how churches are working with this Eco-Church program. But the first step that we have to take is to conduct an audit, and we go through each of these points and we look at how do we use our land. In the church that I attend, we have a very small garden. We're an urban church, but still we have a little bit of land. We try to assess the extent to which we are engaging in maybe community activities. Where do we feel the congregation is in terms of its lifestyle change? We go through each of our ministry areas. So in the church I attend, this includes children's ministry, how we run the creche for our babies, the work of the choir, the people who arrange the flowers, the various ministries that we run. Like we have a kitchen where we have a community outreach and do food distributions to people who need food. So all of these areas are assessed, and then we come up with an action plan to look at how we can then holistic approach. Of course, there are a number of challenges. So sometimes making the shift to a more eco-friendly church, it has some financial implications, some financial constraints, and some of our smaller congregations might struggle with the costs. Although in Belgium, where I live, we have been able to get some subsidies from the local government to help us with some of the initiatives that we have put in place. We have a number of old and historic buildings, so sometimes we identify changes, which might be, I gave the example of solar panels, but often the churches have very old heating systems, or there may be government laws about the buildings themselves that make it difficult for us to adapt. Even if you think something simple like putting in an energy efficient window might be difficult because of the protection that the buildings are under. So that is sort of some of the challenges that we have with the old and historic buildings. There's resistance to change that we have to overcome. So some congregation members might resist the eco-friendly changes. They might see them as being unnecessary or inconvenient. It often requires people to change the way that they have been working or engaging in the ministry, and that can be difficult for some people. We have found in our situation that really driving many of the changes requires volunteers and people in the congregation who have a heart for this work, to really work and to drive change. And you will know it's not easy to work with volunteers. They can sometimes get tired or busy with other aspects of life. And sometimes we don't have the expertise that we need to put forward the changes that we know that we need to put in place. Perhaps the last one I will mention is the importance of leadership and vision. So we found that we really need strong church leadership. So in our case, those would be the ministers, the people that lead the congregation, and the councils, the people who also make the decisions about the church strategy, about church budget, and about church priorities. And it's really very important to have those people on board to drive through the changes, especially when the decisions get difficult and they get hard, and they will get difficult and they will get hard. So those are just maybe a few of the challenges, and I'm sure that some of the other speakers might identify more which are relevant for your context. But I will just spend a few minutes to end with some examples of the ways in which churches are being encouraged to make changes. So I talked about the solar panels, and this is not just about reducing reliance on fossil fuels, but shifting to this renewable energy. We have found that we're also to extend some of the energy that we generate to pay it back to people in communities who have energy problems. So that's a nice way that our use of solar panels is able to support the community and people in the community around us. In terms of heating, some churches have been able to put in heat pumps to warm the church. Other churches have been able to rewild their gardens and the land that they have to create new spaces to support biodiversity, so planting wildflowers and native species to encourage bees and other pollinators and other wildlife. Some spaces that have wider grounds can really turn their spaces into community space for environmental education and engagement. Churches who are undergoing renovations are encouraged to opt for eco-friendly building materials and designs, and making sure that they use good insulation, improved glazing, use sustainable timber, or use recycled or upscaled materials to minimize the environmental impact. A number of churches have moved to vegetarian and plant-based events, and some of the sort of more senior councils in the church system have done this as well. And perhaps those are maybe some of the examples of activities that have happened at the church level, but perhaps one of the bigger questions is around the carbon offsetting and ethical investments. So churches often hold a lot of money, and it's good financial stewardship for us to invest that money. But increasingly churches are sort of divesting, thinking about where is that money invested and trying to ensure that those funds are invested in ethical industries or ethical investments, so that they can divest from fossil fuels and reinvest in sustainable industries. So our church, which has a bank account, we moved our bank account so that could be with a more ethical bank. And then maybe then our churches, I mentioned that part on worship, and that's very important. So during creation care, we have a strong focus. It's also educating the church community on what's happening with the environment, what's happening with climate, what are the biblical examples that we look to support that work, and then encouraging lifestyle change. And I would say that of all the different methods that we use, probably the hardest is really in encouraging congregations to change their lifestyles. It's relatively easy to ask people to pray, or to get people to agree that when we have a church meeting, we should have that to be vegetarian. But when we're really asking people to consider how they travel, can they reduce the number of flights, can they use less plastic in their homes, this is where it's, and then maybe the other, sort of maybe a couple of other initiatives that we've seen churches put in place: water conservation efforts, to putting in rainwater harvesting systems. Some churches are looking at eco-friendly burials, and then maybe finally, a number of churches have been hosting eco-fairs. So perhaps it's addressing that point of encouraging lifestyle change, but where we would bring in environmentally friendly cleaning products, household products, or examples, the very practical examples, and the ways in which people can shift to a more eco-friendly lifestyle at home. So that's just a very maybe brief overview to get the conversation started on the different ways, a little bit of the history, that governance side of things, because I think that's also been important to the church, driving through change, the importance of that net zero target, which really gives us as a whole church something to aim for. Some examples of practical ways in which churches have been trying to shift to more eco-friendly or sustainable approaches, and then that's all wrapped up, I would say, with the Eco-Church Award system, which really gives us a very solid framework for change and a motivator for change if we need that, and also a visible encouragement to churches through the award system. So thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to take the floor. I'm very interested perhaps to hear if any of my reflections resonate with your own thinking and the work that you're doing. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ms. Ruth Faber, for the informative and enlightening experiences of the eco-friendly church in Europe or England. But before I move to the next speaker, I'll maybe just executive summary in Bahasa, as it is requested by the audience. Jadi ini saya ringkaskan sedikit karena ini ada kemiripan ternyata, meskipun ini konteksnya agak berbeda kalau kita air, kalau di mereka pemanas ruangan dan lain sebagainya. Jadi kita punya permasalahan yang sama. Cuma kesadaran ini dari gereja-gereja di Eropa itu cukup 1980 itu sudah ada kesadaran bagaimana mewujudkan eco-friendly dari para jamaah. Jadi dari bawah itu jamaah sudah sadar, terus kemudian muncullah lembaga-lembaga seperti punya Ibu Ruth Faber ini yang kita masih tergantung sama Kemenak, sayangnya kemasjidan. Kalau mereka itu banyak ormas-ormas, lembaga-lembaga yang sudah membackup, membantu daripada gereja-gereja untuk mewujudkan eco-friendly masjid, eco-friendly gereja itu. Gitu. Terus kemudian program-programnya ternyata juga luar biasa. Ada kesadaran bersama. Sebenarnya mirip dengan kesadaran saat kita ini. Jadi mereka sudah ibadah ya kayak seperti kita lah, bukan hanya ritual. Jadi disisipkan dalam kajian, pengajaran, juga peribadatan dan kegiatan-kegiatan di masjid itu sudah disebarluaskan lewat ministry-ministry atau kita ketakmiran yang ada di gereja kayak gitu. Tentu juga banyak tantangan. Ini sama dengan tantangan kita. Ternyata uang itu tantangan yang universal. Jadi pendanaan mau mewujudkan eco-friendly gereja juga ada izin karena banyak gereja di Eropa mungkin itu yang bangunan tua. Jadi mau di eco-friendly itu perizinan bermasalah. Nah ini kita kayaknya nggak ada ini masalah izin. Terus kemudian bangunan-bangunan tua dan juga sama dengan kita. Kita mau inovasi itu kadang banyak perlawanan juga dari jamaah yang lain. Jadi tidak semua yang ada jamaah itu setuju dengan eco-friendly gitu. Karena ini perubahan. Makanya beliau menyarankan leadership dari gereja. Kalau kita leadership dari takmir itu menjadi sangat urgen. Terus kemudian persis yang disampaikan oleh sebenarnya tadi Bu Ana sama Dr. Muhammad Nuh tadi, kalau tadi kan masalah air. Air wudhu di sungai itu bukan masalah airnya habis atau tidak. Itu masalah innal mubadzirin itu. Kalau beliau menyampaikan solar panel itu bukan masalah efisien atau tidak. Karena sekarang solar panel itu jauh lebih bersan 90 bahkan lebih murah dari bahan energi energi fosil itu sekarang lebih murah. Makanya solar panel itu, tapi bukan masalah murah atau tidak murah solar panel. Ini masalah perspektif, masalah keberpihakan atau sustainability. Makanya terakhir beliau menyampaikan, makanya ketika nanti akan merenovasi masjid, membangun masjid, beliau menawarkan harus ada perspektif tentang eco-friendly masjid. Itu yang beliau tawarkan yang luar biasa, kadang-kadang kita terlupa. Jadi, so again thank you very much Mrs. Ruth for the informative and enlightening information for us, for the audiences. And also for the next speaker will be delivered by Dr. Sultan Faisal Al-Rumaithi. He is the head of the Masjid Raya Sheikh Zayed Foundation. He has been here for a long time, for maybe more than 2 years. His house was here. Nah, rumahnya dulu di sini. 1 tahun tinggal di hotel ini sebelum pindah ke apartemen. Jadi sangat yang paling paham tentang hotel ini ya beliau ini. Karena 1 tahun tinggal di hotel. Waktu beliau jadi pengurus Masjid Raya Syekh Zayed Solo. And also before he was the Secretary General of the Muslim Elders. So he is the Secretary General of Majlis Hukama. Yeah. And he has so many experience. He is from Abu Dhabi, the United Arab Emirates. So the floor is yours, brother.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله رب المشارق والمغارب، الحمد لله رب العالمين سبحانه وتعالى لا يسأم كثرة السؤال والطلب.
Alhamdulillah Allah yang telah menguasai timur dan barat, dan alhamdulillah Allah Subhanahu wa taala la yasamu yang tidak ingin atau bosan untuk selalu ada orang yang bertanya-tanya.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa azwajihi wa dhurriyyatihi kama sallaita ala Ibrahim wa barik ala Muhammadin wa ala azwajihi wa dhurriyyatihi kama barakta ala Ibrahim wa ali Ibrahim innaka Hamidum Majid.
Salawat dan salam kita sampaikan kepada Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, keluarganya, dan juga salat kepada Nabi Ibrahim alaihissalam.
قال الله تعالى في سورة التوبة الآية 108 لمسجد أسس على التقوى من أول يوم أحق أن تقوم فيه رجال يحبون أن يتطهروا والله يحب المتطهرين. حديثنا اليوم هو عن تأسيس المسجد، كيف يؤسس المسجد.
Allah Subhanahu wa taala dalam surat At-Taubah telah menyampaikan masjidun ussisa 'ala taqwa dalam surat At-Taubah 108, hadis yang disampaikan oleh Rasulullah berpacu pada ayat Al-Qur'an menyampaikan asas atau pondasi dari masjid itu sendiri adalah at-taqwa.
مسجد التقوى هذا يقال أنه مسجد قباء ويقال كذلك أنه المسجد النبوي الشريف، وكلاهما في المدينة المنورة. وفريق آخر من العلماء يقولون هي كل مساجد المدينة المنورة.
Masjid yang dikategorikan adalah takwa adalah ada yang mengatakan Masjid Quba, kemudian Masjid Nabawi, dan para ulama mengatakan semua masjid.
ويعني على الهامش هناك فائدة.
Ada beberapa faidah.
أحق أن تقوم فيه يعني كأنه افتتاح للمسجد، كأنه كما يقال في عصرنا هذا قص الشريط. فيعني هذه الفائدة الأولى.
Yang faedah yang pertama dari ayat yang disampaikan oleh dalam firman Allah Subhanahu wa taala tadi.
ثم طبعا هو هذا المسجد يسبقه في نفس الصورة مسجد الضرار. ثم دعوة النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم لحضور هذا المسجد ومباركته.
Pada intinya Rasulullah SAW itu diantaranya adalah pingin membangun masjid dan memberi keberkahan untuk masjid itu, bukan seperti Masjid Dirar.
وهنا يعني نستن بسنة الرسول صلى الله عليه وسلم بأن ندعو يعني العلماء والأشراف وكبار القوم لحضور المساجد ومباركتها كذلك.
Sebagian ulama dan seluruh ulama mengatakan ketika kita hadir dalam sebuah masjid itu memberikan keberkahan untuk kita semua.
يقول الله سبحانه وتعالى هنا أسس على التقوى، ولكن السؤال أليس يعني يؤسس المسجد على الطوب والحجارة أم يؤسس على التقوى؟ التقوى شيء معنوي.
Membangun masjid itu, pondasi masjid bukan hanya tub saja, bukan hanya batu bata, kemudian asjar, kemudian batu-batu, tapi membangunnya itu dari hati, dari ketakwaan.
يقول القاسمي في محاسن التأويل وهو من علماء الشام يعني المتأخرين، يقول معنى قوله سبحانه وتعالى أسس على التقوى يعني بنيت قواعده على طاعة الله وذكره.
Ulama dari Hisham atau dari Syria mengatakan bahwa pondasi dari masjid itu adalah ya dari dalam hati dan ketakwaan kita itu sendiri, bukan karena bangunannya yang megah dan mewah.
وقصد التحفظ من المعاصي بفعل الصلاة التي تنهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر.
Dan menjauhkan masjid dari beberapa kemaksiatan, karena inna sholata tanha 'anil fahsya'i wal munkar.
ولأن السنة الشريفة تفسر القرآن الكريم أسوق لكم حديث الصحابي الجليل أنس بن مالك كاتم سر النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم.
Kita mengenang Anas bin Malik. Anas bin Malik ini ada yang mengatakan adalah pelayan Rasul. Tapi disampaikan katimir Rasul. Katim itu kalau bahasanya ini sesuatu yang rahasia. Ketika Rasulullah itu mau menyampaikan kepada Anas bin Malik, yang lain belum tahu. Jadi bisik-bisik lah, bisik-bisik tetangga gitu lah.
هذه القصة يرويها سيدنا أنس كان عمره 10 سنوات يعني كان طفل هو ولد قبل الهجرة ب10 سنوات.
10 tahun waktu Anas bersama dengan Rasulullah.
يقول في الحديث هذا الحديث روي في البخاري في كتاب الصلاة يقول لما قدم رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم المدينة نزل في علو المدينة.
Ketika disampaikan oleh sebuah hadis ketika Rasulullah SAW di kota Madinah.
في الأحاديث الأخرى
hadis lain
أنها هي قباء.
Ada yang mengatakan turun di Masjid Quba.
وأقام فيهم 14 ليلة.
Dan bermukim di situ 14 malam.
ثم أرسل إلى بني النجار وبني النجار هم خوال الرسول صلى الله عليه وسلم.
Dan mengutus dari Bani Najar
هم خوال الرسول صلى الله عليه وسلم.
Ya, di belakang Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
فجاءوا خوال الرسول صلى الله عليه وسلم إلى الرسول صلى الله عليه وسلم وهم متقيدي السيوف.
Dan ketika itu Bani Najar menggunakan suyuh, jadi kayak semacam kayu gitu sekitarnya Rasulullah.
وهذه عادة من عادات أهل المدينة في إكرام الضيف كذلك توجد في جاوا يعني لما يأتيهم ضيف ذو منزلة كبيرة يذهبون إليه بالخناجر هنا في جاوا.
Jadi ini seperti tradisi Jawa ketika ada duyuf, ada tamu, tradisi saja itu menghormati, ada yang memakai keris atau memakai bahasanya tombak gitu ya.
وهنا يقول سيدنا أنس بن مالك يقول وكأني أنظر إلى رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم وهو على راحلته ورديفه أبو بكر الصديق.
Seakan-akan waka'anni. Jadi Anas bin Malik ini mempunyai sebuah keistimewaan, seakan-akan akan terjadi, ya kan? Akan terjadi nanti Anas bin Malik ini melihat di belakang Rasulullah ada Abu Bakar As-Siddiq dengan rombongannya.
Wa mala'un min Bani Najjar haulah.
Dan beberapa komunitas Bani Najjar di sekitarnya.
Wa huwa Anas bin Malik huna طفل يستدعي ذاكرته كأنه يرى فيلم. كأنه يرى فيلم فيقول كأني أرى الآن كأني أرى يستذكر خياله يستذكر تلك اللحظات العظيمة التي وفد فيها رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إلى المدينة.
Seakan-akan kalau bahasa sekarang itu kayak indigo, jadi melihat masa depan. Seakan-akan melihat wah ini ada rombongan di belakang Rasulullah dengan Bani Najjar seperti itu tadi. Ini khayal, seakan-akan melihat film, sampaikan melihat studio. Oh, koyok akan terjadi gitu.
يستدرك هنا أنس بن مالك فيقول وكان صلى الله عليه وسلم يصلي حيثما وقف فيصلي في مرابض الغنم يعني في الأماكن التي ترعى فيها الغنم.
Anas bin Malik tadi melihat seakan-akan Rasulullah itu sedang sholat di Mura'il Ghanam, tempat untuk mengembala ghanam, kambing lah.
وفي حديث آخر لعروة بن الزبير بنص قريب من هذا النص يقول يصلي في مرابض الغنم وكان يعني لا يصلي في أعطان الإبل.
Ada yang mengatakan di Mura'il Ibil, ibil itu Jamal.
نعم. فأرسل إلى بني النجار فوصلت راحلته إلى مكان ناقته ووقف.
Kemudian memanggil Bani Najjar untuk berhenti di situ.
وكان هذا المكان مربدا مربدا للتمر.
Tempat itu adalah marbat, yakni tempat
التمر الرطب يجفف في الشمس فهذا المربد.
untuk mengeringkan. Kalau tamar pertama kali kan rutop, kemudian dikeringkan menjadi tamar. Kalau orang Jawa itu nggih apa ya, sing Jawa ini mepe gabah karak gitulah.
وكانت هذه الارض هنا وجه الاستدلال. وكانت هذه الارض يعني خربه، يعني مثل ما يقال هنا مثل في لغتنا كان عشوائيات مهجوره.
Seakan-akan tempat itu ya luas gitulah.
وكانت يعني هي لغلامين يتيمين سهل وسهيل.
Kita mengenang Sahal dan Suhail di area tadi itu.
فيعني طلبهم الرسول فأتوا إلى الرسول صلى الله عليه وسلم فقال لهم أشتري منكم هذه الأرض اللي هي أرض بناء المسجد النبوي.
Sahal dan Suhail ini kan dua anak yatim dan Rasul mau membeli tanah karena ini anak yatim untuk mendirikan Masjid Nabawi.
فقالوا لا يعني هي لله، يعني هم قالوا هي لله.
Enggak ya Rasul, udah enggak usah beli, udah lillah. Kalau untuk masjid saya serahkan untuk engkau ya Rasul.
ولكن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أصر أن يشتري الأرض.
Tapi enggak bisa, Rasul tetap membeli tanah tadi itu.
المهم هذه الأرض كانت فيها يعني أرض يعني مهجورة، وكان فيها قبور للمشركين وكان فيها نخل وكان فيها خرب يعني. فأمر الرسول صلى الله عليه وسلم فنبشت قبور المشركين وسويت الأرض ونظفت من النخل وقطع النخل وكانت يعني مستوية.
Tempat itu kan tempat juga selain sampingnya Suhail tadi itu tanahnya ada tempat kuburan orang-orang musyrik ya dan para mazari-mazari yang lain.
النخل الذي قطع استخدم في بناء المسجد.
An-nakhl, Bapak Ibu tahu ya, nakhl itu kayak semacam apa namanya pohon kurma, itu nakhl untuk membangun masjid pertama kali Masjid Nabawi.
فوضع في اتجاه القبلة.
Kalau di desa itu ada tempat untuk menengeri itu bahasa Indonesianya menandai kiblat dari pohon kurma itu awal marah seperti itu.
نعم وهنا يعني الاستدلال أن المسجد بني بمواد صديقة للبيئة.
Itu tadi kita bisa melihat pertama kali adalah masjid itu dibangun dari lingkungan.
وكان المسجد وقتها كان يعني باتجاه القبلة كان المسجد الأقصى.
Pertama kali arah kiblat di arah Masjidil Aqsa.
وكان للمسجد 3 أبواب. وخلف المسجد هناك مكان يعني مكان في مظلل للفقراء.
Ada 3 pintu di masjid itu dan ada tempat khusus untuk pintu menuju ke fuqara, orang-orang fakir miskin.
وكان الرسول صلى الله عليه وسلم يشارك أصحابه في بناء المسجد.
Kemudian Rasul mengajak, ayo siapa yang mau ikut saya untuk membangun masjid ini?
وكان يبنى من الحجارة ومن الطين.
Ada yang dibangun dari mulai hijarah, dari mulai batu, pondasi lah, kemudian dengan tin, dengan tanah.
وكلها هي مواد موجودة في المدينة المنورة.
Semuanya ada di Madinah Al-Munawwarah.
وكان الرسول صلى الله عليه وسلم يقوي عزيمة أصحابه فينشدون وهم يبنون المسجد فيقولون اللهم لا خير إلا خير الآخرة فانصر الأنصار والمهاجرة.
Kemudian Rasul menguatkan ya untuk para sahabat Ansor dan Muhajirin agar bersatu membangun masjid itu.
طبعا المسجد هذا كان في السنة الأولى للهجرة مساحته 1000 متر.
Pertama kali 1000 meter. 1000
ثم في
meter.
السنة السابعة للهجرة زاده الرسول فأصبح 1400 متر.
Arafah pertama kali 100 meter, 1000 meter, kemudian 1400 meter.
ثم كذلك الخلفاء الراشدين رضوان الله عليهم كل ما يأتي إمام للمسلمين وكل ما يأتي خليفة للمسلمين يعدل ويجمل ويزيد من هذا المسجد.
Kemudian zaman Khulafaur Rasyidin, zaman setelah itu tabi'in, kemudian menjadi indah masjid itu.
خلاصة القول في هذه المسألة أن بناء الرسول صلى الله عليه المسجد كان يعني من الأمور المهمة هي أن يؤسس المسجد لجماعة المسجد، وأن جماعة المسجد هم الأناس الذين يحبون أن يتطهروا.
Kesimpulan dari yang saya sampaikan bahwa apa? Membangun masjid itu adalah manusia-manusia yang memang niatnya ingin ayyatatoharu, menyucikan dirinya. Terima kasih atas disampaikan.
So thank you very much for Dr. Sultan who gave us very informative and valuable information. So the most important thing is that the place of worship is the principle is based on the goodness of the heart. So this is become the foundation of. Later we talk about the eco-friendly masjid. So anyone who want to build and serve for the masjid, they are the one who are looking for the goodness, taqwa for Allah Subhanahu Wa Taala. And later, and then we build the program. One of them is eco-friendly, the masjid. And for the next speakers, there's recorded videos, and please the committee of the you can directly from Professor Nasaruddin Umar. He is the Grand Imam of the Masjid Istiqlal in Jakarta, and for the question and answer, one also the Takmir of the Masjid Istiqlal, Dr. Farid will also help to answer if there is some question in the question and answer session later. And then after that, please directly, and then you can play the recorded video of the Mr. Dinesh Suna, who is from the World Council of Church from Switzerland. He has social activist. He has very specific concern on the water preservation. So this is also one of the concern of our masjid, because water is not only cleanliness but also not only taharo. Recently we have a big awareness and also how to preserve the water in the masjid, as also has been explained by Dr. Muhammad Zakwa in the Masjid of Putrajaya, Malaysia. So please try to play the recorded video from both Mr. Professor Dr. Nasaruddin Umar and then Mr. Dinesh Suna.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Warahmatullahi
Alhamdulillah wa syukurillah wa salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah Sayyidina Habibina wa Syafi'ina wa Maulana wa Atba'ina Qurrata A'yunina Muhammad. Allahumma salli sallim alaihi. Excellency, all speakers and participants for this very interesting international conference. I'm really apologize because I need to join together with you, but you know, I just leave from the hospital for surgery. So of course we need the rest. We need the time for the rest. Inshallah, in the next time and any place we can join together with all of you in international conference. And the second one, if someone of you want to follow my statement here in English version, I think my papers I have already sent to the organizer. My topic, from religious diplomacy to solution of environmental crisis, rebuilding awareness of the role of worship halls on climate change. 8-page. You can follow my papers, but in this time allow me to speak bahasa Indonesia, because I think majority I see all of you here are Indonesian. Bapak Ibu sekalian, ada satu hal yang menarik ya. Akhir tahun yang lalu saya diundang ke New York karena ada sebuah statement yang dilontarkan oleh Carol Armstrong. Kita semuanya tahu bahwa Carol Armstrong itu adalah seorang penulis produktif di Amerika Serikat ya sekarang ini, yang banyak sekali bukunya yang the bestseller itu. Ada mengutip sebuah NGO bahwa penyebab rusaknya lingkungan alam sekarang ini sesungguhnya adalah mendapatkan legitimasi dari Abrahamic religion, yaitu Yahudi, Nasrani atau Kristen, dan Islam. Kenapa? Karena ketiga agama besar ini memberikan legitimasi ke semacam walhinya Amerika itu ya, bahwa tiga agama besar inilah yang menyebabkan rusaknya lingkungan. Karena mereka memberikan toleransi untuk melakukan eksplorasi alam melampaui daya dukung alam itu sendiri. Nah, sehubungan dengan itu, teman-teman di Amerika itu tentu akan protes bahwa pernyataan itu tidak sepenuhnya benar. Maka dikumpullah tiga komponen agama ini melakukan research intensif di Columbia University di New York pada bulan Januari dan Februari. Nah, saya nggak tahu kenapa mereka memilih saya dari Muslim Scholars dan ada juga dari Yahudi dan Nasrani. Ada sekitar 10 orang lah di situ itu. Kita intensif selama 2 bulan di Amerika itu untuk melakukan pengkajian mendalam. Apakah betul tuduhan NGO bahwa Abrahamic religion inilah yang merusak lingkungan? Dan kaitannya nanti dengan masjid ini saya kira sangat penting juga ya. Karena di masjid itu merupakan corong untuk menyampaikan pesan-pesan keagamaan kita. Sama juga dengan gereja, sinagog. Ya. Sehubungan dengan itu teman-teman, saya ingin mengingatkan kembali ya bahwa ternyata kita disorot oleh orang luar. Kita dalam Islam juga akan ada. Di dalam kitab Kejadian itu kan misalnya di dalam kitab Genesis pasal 1 ayat 28. Di situ kan juga jelas bahwa setelah alam ini diciptakan maka manusia itu diminta untuk menjadi penguasa alam semesta. Berkuasalah di atas makhluk di atas bumi ini. Jadi ada semacam SIM, license, bagaimana manusia itu bisa menundukkan alam semesta. Di dalam Islam kan juga ada. Wa sakhkhara lakum ma fis samawati wa ma fil ardi. Kami tundukkan semuanya apa yang di langit dan di bumi. Ya, Yahudi dan Kristen sama kan prinsipnya. Di kitab Perjanjian Lama itu jelas banyak. Kitab Mazmurnya juga ada. Nah, kesimpulan yang kami peroleh dari tiga komponen agama yang melakukan riset mendalam ini, religion itu adalah agama monoteisme yang memiliki Tuhan yang sama. Nah, sehubungan dengan itu saya ingin mengingatkan kepada kita semuanya bahwa sorotan-sorotan seperti ini perlu kita jawab memang. Mari kita semuanya, teman-teman yang hadir pada kesempatan ini, kita melakukan dua hal. Pertama, kita membantah tuduhan itu bahwa itu tidak benar. Islam seperti hanya juga dengan Yahudi dan Nasrani tidak diturunkan untuk memberikan kesemena-menaan kepada manusia untuk melakukan eksploitasi terhadap alam semesta melampaui daya dukungnya. Ya. Nah ini perlu kita sampaikan melalui masjid bahwa rumah-rumah ibadah ini penting untuk memberikan semacam informasi yang sangat penting bahwa dosa itu bukan saja melakukan pendaliman terhadap manusia, tetapi juga pendaliman terhadap binatang, tumbuh-tumbuhan, dan bahkan alam semesta itu juga merupakan dosa. Jadi konsep dosa itu jangan hanya diadreskan kepada sesama manusia. Kita pun juga berdosa kalau melakukan perusakan alam. Dan itu tegas ayatnya kan. Wala tufsidu fil ardi ba'da islahiha. jangan Bank Bank Dunia dari Washington DC. Itu hanya Bank Bank Dunia dari Washington DC. Itu hanya Istiqlal. Jadi bukan gereja, bukan sinagog, bukan rumah ibadah lain. Sertifikat atau age ini hanya biasanya diberikan gedung-gedung pencakar langit, ya seperti di Dubai, seperti di Prancis, dan di banyak-banyak tempat itu yang canggih-canggih itu. Nah, baru kali ini semenjak berdirinya yayasan itu di bawah koordinasi Bank Dunia, World Bank di Washington DC, baru kali ini memberikan sertifikat age itu kepada Masjid Istiqlal. Kenapa Masjid Istiqlal? Karena mereka temukan, diam-diam mereka meneliti Istiqlal bahwa 7.500.000 liter air yang digunakan setiap bulan untuk mandi, berwudu, dan kebersihan lain di Istiqlal itu tidak ada satu tetes pun jatuh ke selokan, tapi semuanya ditampung di dalam satu bak yang besar, dan itu kemudian direcycle, langsung bisa diminum. Yang kedua, 38% energi yang digunakan di Istiqlal itu menggunakan solar system, dan solar system itu diperoleh melalui wakaf jamaah. Jadi Istiqlal itu bukan hanya mewakafkan tanah, tetapi mewakafkan matahari. Ya, sinar matahari pun juga itu diwakafkan oleh para jamaahnya untuk memberikan sumber energi kepada Masjid Istiqlal. Sampah-sampah yang ada di Istiqlal itu tidak ada yang dibuang kemana-mana, tapi itu diolah di pabrik. Yang plastik itu kita press, kemudian itu bisa berfungsi ekonomi. Bahkan toiletnya, kita tahu bahwa itu ratusan, bahkan mungkin sampai ya ratusan lah toilet itu di Masjid Istiqlal, dan itu pun juga tidak ada yang dibuang. Itu pun juga nanti digunakan gasnya itu untuk menjadi tambahan energi listrik. Nah, kita punya pabriknya, ada pabrik sampahnya. Nah, inilah yang mereka temukan. Dan untuk sekedar informasi, the only one public space pada masa COVID-19 yang baru lalu, Bapak Ibu sekalian, satu-satunya tempat di Jakarta yang tidak sebiji virus corona hanya ruang utama Masjid Istiqlal. Itu 2 laboratorium internasional meneliti Istiqlal. Itu very, very miracle. Nah, inilah yang membuat kita bangga bahwa Masjid Istiqlal sekarang ini dianggap sebagai masjid yang paling bersih, paling hijau, paling efisien, paling efektif, sehingga mendapatkan penghargaan dari Bank Dunia, World Bank, apa tadi yang sebutkan sebenarnya age itu ya. Dan Istiqlal juga banyak sekali yang kita lakukan di dalamnya. Termasuk yang kita lakukan adalah apa yang disebut di dalam makalah saya nanti itu ada yang disebut dengan ambassador gathering. What is the meaning of ambassador gathering? Jadi kami menginvite seluruh duta besar yang ada di Jakarta untuk diskusi bersama. Bagaimana mempromosikan religious diplomacy. Selama ini formal diplomasi itu sepertinya tidak berhasil meredam peperangan. Bahkan kita lihat ya, peperangan malah Israel semakin menggila sekarang ini. Dia melakukan apapun yang mereka akan lakukan tanpa ada yang mau melakukan persekongkolan bersama untuk melakukan penjinakan. Padahal kalau kita lihat geografisnya Israel itu hanya seperti baskom. Kan itu kan lembah Israel itu. Kalau negeri-negeri Arab itu bersatu kencing semuanya, maka itu mereka itu hanyut itu ke laut itu negara Israel itu. Tapi kok nggak bisa dikalahkan? Itu karena ilmu pengetahuan. Jadi saya ingin pada kesempatan yang sangat berharga ini, saya sebetulnya ingin hadir, tetapi karena saya baru keluar dari rumah sakit ini, dioperasi. Nah, tapi juga saya besok harus berangkat ke Saudi Arabia karena saya salah seorang advisor daripada yayasan kerajaan untuk membicarakan suatu hal yang sangat penting yang terkait dengan apa yang menjadi topik diskusi kita juga pada hari ini. Saya nggak tahu, saya the only one person non-Arab, non Saudi Arabia lah yang diminta sebagai advisor dari MBS di dalam wadah itu. Nah, jadi saya mohon kepada kita semuanya, Istiqlal sekarang ini sudah menjadi waktu kami diterima di UN, United Nations di New York, duta besar masjid. Dan saya sendiri as a President of International Imam Associations diminta untuk ikut juga berbagi ilmu pengetahuan dan pengalaman dia berikan saya tugas ke Amerika Latin, karena Amerika Latin juga sekarang ini sedang banyak perkembangan Islam luar biasa, dan juga di Afrika. Ya, di sana masih kurang orang-orang yang dianggap representatif untuk memberikan penjelasan tentang yang Islam komprehensif itu. Nah, jadi Bapak Ibu sekalian, apa fungsi religious diplomasi ini? Kita akan mencoba menggunakan bahasa agama, religious languages. Bahasa agama itu kan langsung menyentuh batin. Dan kalau bahasa batin yang berbicara, biasanya sekat-sekat primordial, sekat-sekat kedaerahan, kenegaraan, dan sebagainya itu akan tembus. Makanya itu mereka sangat tertarik dengan konsep kami, religious diplomasi ini, untuk kita bisa kembangkan di masa akan datang. Nah, siapa yang ingin mendalami makalah saya nanti bisa dibaca. Dan saya kira inilah pengantar saya. Sekali lagi saya mohon maaf, saya tidak bisa bersama, tetapi ini ada representatif saya. Dan ini asisten saya juga sekaligus, Dr. Farid Zainong. Saya kira beliau bisa menerjemahkan dalam pikiran saya, karena beliau bersama kami semenjak dari ibtidaiyah sampai sekarang ini bersama kami terus. Demikian Bapak Ibu sekalian, terima kasih atas undangannya. Ya, saya mohon maaf saya tidak sebutkan namanya satu persatu di sini, ternyata banyak pejabat ini baru saya lihat. Ya, baru saya tahu ya Pak Dirjen, kemudian para pejabat Kementerian Agama, kemudian all speakers, thank you very much for your attention, and see you in Istiqlal in the next time. Allahumma khilafam tarik, wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Profesor Dr. Nasaruddin Umar. Allahumma yashfi. Nanti untuk pertanyaan, for the questions can be addressed to Dr. Farid. He has been very long time to be with Dr. Nasaruddin Umar long before he became the Grand Imam of the Masjid Istiqlal. And for the next speaker, please, from Mr. Dinesh Suna from Switzerland. Apakah sudah siap? Oh ya.
Hello friends, a very good morning to all of you. My name is Dinesh Suna. I am the coordinator of the Ecumenical Water Network of the World Council of Churches, a global fellowship of 352 churches in about 120 countries, and our membership is about 600 million from around the world, members from the Protestant and Orthodox churches. Friends, I would like to thank the Ministry of the Religious Affairs from Republic of Indonesia for inviting me to bring this brief speech in a recorded form, because I cannot join you in the morning of Indonesia, and therefore I am recording it here in Geneva in Switzerland in the evening. I wish I could have joined you in virtually live. I would like to make a special note of appreciation for my friend and co-worker, Mrs. Nuria Ina, who also work at the PAD, who is a member at the PAD, International Partnership of Religion and Development, where World Council of Churches is also a member. Now, I have been asked to speak about the basic principles and international best practices in the implementation of eco-friendly houses of worship. Friends, since I'm a Christian, I would like to focus more in the Christian worship places in the churches, how they can be more eco-friendly and how they have been eco-friendly. And also I could give a couple of examples from the other faith traditions. According to a UNEP Faith for Coalition publication, the United Nations Environment Program, it says around the world there are estimated 37 million churches and about 4 million mosques and about 20,000 synagogues and hundreds of millions of temples. Many of these houses of faith could become models of sustainability by practicing eco-friendly worship, embracing green buildings, and offering environmentally friendly sermons. To start with, the incorporating green technology into the places of worship itself, the churches, mosques, temples can use renewable energy such as solar power in its roofs, in its walls, etc., and meet their energy requirement. Install water efficient faucets and use, where possible, recycled waters. Secondly, using the pulpit to talk about sustainability. In churches, we say the green pulpit. In the mosques also, we could hear from the imams sermons that are eco-friendly. Now, talk about water, for example. There are, I read somewhere that more than 60 times water is written in the Holy Quran. And I read surprisingly that there is more mention of water in the Holy Bible than the word Christ. This is quite interesting, and thereby, wherever there is a possibility to talk about water, our religious leaders could speak about the water crisis as well. Now, there is an interesting fact about reusing water. Water has spiritual significance in Christianity, in Islam. In holy baptism, we use water. But what about in water-scarce region where baptism has to be taken place and people have to make a choice whether to baptize or to use water for their drinking needs? So reusing the leftover water from the baptism is a possibility. Now, about ablutions, which is an important ritual and a faith practice within the Islamic traditions, in large mosques, so much of water is used for the ablution, but then are we thinking about reusing, treating the water and reusing it for other purposes? And I have come across some fatwas issued by some imams across the world who have encouraged their followers to even use reused water for ablutions purposes where water is already a scarce resource in that region. Then also schools, colleges are run by religious institutions a lot, and thereby we could use the curriculum more environment sustainably to inculcate among the children, for example, or the students. We could also make sure that our worship houses purchase sustainably sourced goods, recycled papers, cleaning products, eco-friendly, fair trade products, etc. Now, I would like to close by giving an example of a publication we have made. It's called Walk the Talk, Church's Roadmap towards an eco-friendly, towards an ecological just and sustainable living. Walk the Talk. You can Google it. We have published at the World Council of Churches. Just to give you an example, there is a way of promoting sustainable farming in the church's premises. It's called Farming God's Way. This is, in a way, it's promoted in many parts of Africa, in Kenya, Uganda, Zambia, and South Africa, promoted by the Methodist and Presbyterian churches, where you give sufficient rest to the ground. There is something called Rainbow Land in Austria, the Lutheran Church in Landskron, Austria. It opens its community garden to the refugees who are seeking asylum there, and then they try to work together in the kitchen garden with the refugees, for example. Ethiopia churches, the Orthodox churches, is one of the oldest churches in the world, and 5% of the land in Ethiopia is covered by the trees, and almost all of it is maintained and managed by the Orthodox churches. So wherever there is greenery, you can find out that probably there is a church nearby. So ranging from anywhere between 3 hectares to 300 hectares of forests are created by these churches in Ethiopia. Now, World Council of Churches has become a blue community. Blue community meaning respect human right to water, say no to privatization of water, and say no to bottled water, because there's enough plastics in our oceans, rivers, and land already. We don't have to add more. And therefore, mosques, churches can also become blue communities and promote human right to water and anti-plastic campaigns. In Switzerland, we have universities, the capital city of Switzerland, Bern, they all have become blue community. Including World Council of Churches, many other churches have divested from fossil fuel, and therefore that could be done by many worship places and the church or faith bodies. Many of our churches have declared to become carbon neutral by 2030, some by 2040s, and also to offset our carbon footprint when we must travel by air or so on. Just to give you some example, there are some good practices of usage of solar power in the Lutheran congregation of Pelotas in Brazil. The Orthodox Academy of Crete has a completely solar roof in its churches. Solar panel charts in the church buildings in the Methodist Church in the UK, Presbyterian Church and the Solar Energy, that is Presbyterian Church in the USA, and many more such examples. You can find all of them in the Walk the Talk. And finally, encourage a bike-friendly church. That means people can be encouraged to come to churches or mosques by bikes, bicycles, and not by car. And we could also have our worship places paperless by using maybe projectors or etc. instead of making hundreds and thousands of photocopies. Friends, these are some of the very few things I have said because of lack of time, but do check out Walk the Talk Toolkit published by World Council of Churches, how our churches and worship places can become environmentally sustainable and eco-friendly. Thank you very much for this opportunity, and I look forward to hearing about the outcome of this symposium. Best wishes to you all. Thank you.
Terima kasih Pak Denny Suna. Let me summarize a little bit. Jadi yang disampaikan oleh Pak Denny Suna tadi hampir mirip dengan Ibu Hurut ya. Mengapa ini menjadi penting? Karena di Eropa sendiri ada 37 juta gereja, 4 juta masjid. Kalau ini bisa menjadi percontoh akan sangat bagus, karena itu salah satu pusat pertemuan manusia. Terus kemudian tadi banyak memang ini sekarang yang palingnya solar panel, dan tadi sudah disampaikan apalagi ini konteksnya di Eropa, ini di Switzerland yang udaranya sangat dingin. Jadi bagaimana apalagi masjid-masjid yang ada di Eropa ini menjadi, makanya mereka menyatakan solar panel yang gereja-gereja atau masjid itu di on grid, jadi dipasang solar panel ini menjadi sangat signifikan untuk mengurangi. Mereka kan tadi sampaikan Buru 2030 itu net zero emission. Sementara untuk memang saya nggak bisa membayangkan seandainya karena memang konsumsi listrik sana yang pakai fuel atau batu bara itu kan sangat tinggi. Seandainya wudhu tanpa tanpa air panas itu bisa langsung masuk angin. Jadi antangin akan laris di sana. Jadi bayangan itu tadi yang disampaikan itu adalah bagaimana masjid tadi maksudnya tempat-tempat ibadah itu bisa menjadi eco-friendly, secara ekologi dan sustainability bisa bagus. Silahkan mengunjungi tadi publikasi mereka What the Talks gitu. Itu lebih jelasnya dijelaskan dalam What the Talks itu. Silahkan di Google kayak gitu. So this is the last presentation. So we almost run out of the time. Hampir selesai. Tadi sudah maju sedikit. So we only have like 7 to 10 minutes for the question and answer. So maybe just 2 from the gentleman or from lady. Yeah. Oh 3. Yes, okay. Yeah. From the front. Jadi 3 saja. silakan Bapak, nanti Bapak yang di sana sama Ibu yang di tengah. Jadi only 3. I think we can discuss later in the parallel session for them because we only have like 7 to 10 minutes left. Silahkan Bapak. Ya.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi.
Ismahuli annani ismi Subhan Lubis. Ya. Subhan Lubis kardi asah lil Masjid Al-Kabir Syekh Ahmad Khatib Al-Minangkabawi Sumatera Al-Gharbiyah. Ismahuli an aqula lakum fil haqiqah khususan lil Ustaz Sultan
Al-Rumaiti.
Ya, Al-Rumaiti. Walakin al-an wa ghaib.
Mazala fil wara'.
Ya, maaf ya.
Walakin ana sa'aktub as-su'al.
Insyaallah, syukran. Anna min ansyitati
As-su'al laka ya Syekh.
Naam.
Ada Syekh Sultan.
Ya, naam, syukran.
As-su'al laka.
Ya. Anna min ansyitati idaratil masjid taqdimat tawjih lil murahiqina wasyabab allati nusammihi bi syababil masjid. Ya, syababil masjid. Liza ya litashji'ihim wa aidan litashji'i syababil masajid al-akharin fi Indonesia. Kaifa yumkin idrajuhum fi tadrib syabab al-islami kad-daurah aw ghairiha allati tuqadu fi syarqil awsat. Syukran. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Mungkin Danu pakai bahasa Indonesia juga bisa.
Kita
ya paham.
Kita kan di Mesir Raya Sumatera Barat. Di antara kegiatannya itu kan membina remaja masjid. Ya, Syababul Masjid. Membina remaja masjid. Lalu kita ingin bertanya untuk memberikan semangat kepada mereka dan juga kepada remaja masjid yang ada di Indonesia ini, bagaimana caranya supaya mereka diikut sertakan dalam pelatihan-pelatihan yang ada di Timur Tengah. Nah, jadi di Timur Tengah, ya seperti daurah dan lain-lain sebagainya.
Ya, terima kasih Bapak.
Ya, syukran. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi.
Yang pojok Bapak.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
My name is Rama Satria. I'm one of takmir of Masjid Oman Al-Makmur, which is located in Banda Aceh. About this eco-friendly mosque team, the question is, who would back it up? What bodies or department or are there funder for this eco-friendly mosque movement? Because we, from Masjid Oman Al-Makmur, which is located in Kampung Bandar Baru, a subdivision of District Kuta Alam in Banda Aceh City, has already have a master plan for green energy program, which using solar panel as the main power that could reduce electricity that produced by PLN or the state electrical company by about 70%. Or do we have to be fully independent financially? Because right now, we organize our masjid fully independent by donation from our Jama'ah and income from our 22 rooms hotel. And to build a solar panel system that covers our electricity needs, it would take approximately 1.2 or 1.5 billion rupiahs. And to build such a system is really not easy for us to gather this amount of funds. So I think these climate change issues are our our problems not only as a community but as a nation as a nation of the world, where right now Muslims are 2 billion people on the earth, and prediction that that said Islam would increase as #1 religion by 2050. So about these problems, how to generate togetherness and to apply. Thank you.
The lady in the middle of the second table from the left, from my left. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Let me introduce myself, Mutmainah Quraish from North Kalimantan. This is a simple question. I think the concept of Islam is clear on the environment, but how to develop that concept in our real life or in every life? I mean, what programs can be made for mosques, especially they are far from the centers of governments. For the example, we have a floating mosque underneath, and it's full of garbage. And there are lots of plastic and polluting the ocean and polluting the rivers. And I think how to build awareness of dangers of garbage. And how to change this, I think, about the bad habits. And
Istiqlal, for example, how to get the fundraising for the installation of the solar panel PV in Masjid Istiqlal, and also how to get the step, how to implement the eco-friendly masjid. And also I'll answer tomorrow, because from the practice of Masjid Raya Syekh Zayed Solo. Jadi besok juga akan kita jawab pertanyaan Bapak Ibu sekalian yang untuk besok kan berkunjung ke Masjid Raya Syekh Zayed Solo. Itu ada beberapa langkah, karena Masjid Raya Syekh Zayed Solo itu baru sekali. Jadi masih baby, tapi sejak awal ussisa min awali yaumin will be eco-friendly. Gitu. Jadi silahkan from Dr. Sultan, please answer from Sheikh Sofyan Lubis.
Yes. Assalamualaikum. First of all, I would like to thank you for your question, and I think based on our religion, our kitab, our tradition as well, our cultural context here in Indonesia, we have to develop strategies. That those strategies can enhance the engagement of youth to the local society and to the masjid as a access point for youth to practice salah, also to practice another things. One of the amazing practices here in Indonesia that all time I'm speaking about it when I connected to my people in United Arab Emirates, the concept of Jama'at al-Ta'mir. Already in our countries, we handle the mission of Jama'at al-Ta'mir to the Ministry of Al-Awqaf, where here the most activities or the major of activities is handled by Jama'at al-Ta'mir. This is the most important thing. So based on this, I think our speech should be directly go to Jama'at al-Ta'mir and ask them to understand the context of the local society, then discuss with them and come up with strategy and mission and also operation things. Like here from our experience here in Jami' Sheikh Zayed, the Jama'at al-Ta'mir making initiatives to engage with youth. Like when they uploading something on Instagram, they try to establish a connection, direct connection. So the format of the video the text, the style of action, we try to attract people to come. And inshallah, after 2 days, we will, inshallah, I will arrange tomorrow morning. No. I mean for Mawlid al-Nabawi. We will celebrate the Mawlid al-Nabawi and we designed a program which will attract youth to come to the masjid and celebrate together the Mawlid Nabawi. And I will give my partner here, Dr. Muraja, to speak about the role of youth in the masjid. Just, yes.
Yeah. Maybe I'll speak in Indonesia to make it more clear, brother. Jadi untuk pemuda malah sebaliknya, Pak. Arab itu malah justru harusnya belajar dari Indonesia kayak gitu. Karena di sana yang mengurus masjid itu negara. Jadi nggak ada anak muda yang ngurusi masjid. Gitu. Jadi malah mereka harus belajar sama kita gitu. Terus itu untuk caranya gini, malah justru beliau menyatakan kehebatan yang sini yang mengurus masjid itu takmir dan diverse, berbeda-beda itu. Bahkan banyak anak mudanya gitu. Contohnya yang disampaikan beliau, karena beliau sama saya pengurus Masjid Raya Syekh Zayed, itu contohnya kalau ingin lihat yang besok itu kajian Maulid Nabi, itu justru targetnya itu anak-anak muda. Jadi besok acara Maulid Nabi itu kita ada mengundang international guest yang hari ini akan sampai nanti jemput, insya Allah semoga nanti bertemu dengan Bapak Ibu Mustafa Atif yang nyanyi Komarun sama Aisyah istri Rasulullah. Itu pelantun internasional didatangkan langsung oleh Emirat untuk mengajak orang cinta Maulid Nabi Muhammad SAW. Terus kemudian Mauidhah Hasanah, jadi Dr. Muhammad Nuh untuk besok so William Mil Jumah al-Haflah li Maulidin Nabawi sayulki Dr. Muhammad Nuh. Jadi gitu. Jadi kita menarik anak mudanya. Jadi sekali lagi beliau masih tapi nggak usah khawatir, Pak. Ini meskipun tidak disampaikan beliau kemarin itu Kementerian Agama dari Pak Zayadi juga itu mengirim dai-dai muda ke Uni Emirat Arab di kursus di Muhammad bin Zayed University, tapi bukan tentang masjidan, tapi tentang dakwah. So Fisan Al-Madhiyah yursil the youth ashabab huna ila Abu Dhabi fi Muhammad bin Zayed University. Ya, itu nanti ke Pak Zayadi, Pak. Nanti tahun depan semoga ada, nanti dari temanya biar diganti kan. Kebetulan mengirim banyak itu sekarang sejak kerjasama dari Bimas Islam itu. Jadi kalau Pak Sultan tadi harusnya yang belajar itu Uni Emirat ke Indonesia. Karena sekarang itu ada 200 lebih masjid di Uni Emirat Arab itu imamnya dari Indonesia. Dan kebetulan untuk imam dari beberapa negara nggak bisa saya sebutkan, Bapak tahu semua, itu dihentikan di moratorium dan hanya menerima dari imam-imam yang pokoknya masjid yang kosong itu diusahakan itu imamnya dari Indonesia. Nanti kalau nggak percaya tanya tanya Mas Akmal, itu termasuk seleksi. Jadi kalau ada masjid-masjid, ada pemuda lulusan SMA atau lulusan S1 sudah hafal 20 juz, suaranya bagus. Karena kebetulan imam dari Indonesia itu yang dicintai oleh masyarakat Emirat Arab gitu. Suaranya halus dan gak niko-niko gitu loh, ngayomi gitu loh. Jadi di kapak-kapak ngalah rapopo. Jadi luar biasa, itulah yang dicintai dari mereka kayak gitu. Jadi Syekh Farid ini terakhir untuk
Right, thank you very much for the questions. Yeah, financial support is one of our big problem too in Istiqlal. From the Ministry of Religious Affairs, Istiqlal only receive 15 billion per year, and it's far below what Istiqlal need for the whole year. which is about more or less 111 billion per year for the whole services and activities in the mosque. So how, the Grand Imam look for financial support? We could say that the Grand Imam, in this case Professor Nasaruddin Umar, always and he's not ashamed of meeting people to ask financial support from anyone. He came to ministries, the ministers, to also support the mosque. He comes to business people, as well as in Istiqlal, we already found and launched for the last 3 years the so-called Istiqlal Global Fund, which its task is to find money for the mosque, and then to cover the whole needs of what Istiqlal needs for the whole year. In the case of eco-friendly projects in Istiqlal, we have the same problem as well. The solar system we have in Istiqlal only cover about 30% of the whole electricity need every month in Istiqlal. So it's still very small, and we are trying to add more and more solar system units in Istiqlal. And in 2021, I myself collaborated with Kita Bisa, to the energy wakaf or energy endowment, including what we did with Kita Bisa and with other projects as well in Istiqlal. So it's a part of our challenges today. We have the spirit to establish eco-friendly projects in many mosques in Indonesia, but we face this problem. But again, today is collaborative time. We cannot do anything alone. So we need to find collaborators from many parties, including, in Jakarta, probably we are lucky. We have embassies in Jakarta, and we could collaborate as well with them. And so far, we collaborated with some embassies, not only for eco-friendly mosque project, but also for any other educational activities in Istiqlal, with the support of some embassies, including what we are having today with the program of Ulama Education Program, with the full support of LPDP scholarship. So again, expand this network. Meet people. Do some smart strategies to find financial support from many parties. I think that's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Farid. So it has been answered by Dr. Farid. Maybe I'll conclude in Indonesia, so that because this is our challenge together. Jadi masalah pendanaan itu seringkali also because of has been explained by Miss Ruth, di gereja di Eropa juga punya permasalahan yang sama. Mungkin besok saya akan cerita bagaimana pengurus itu Pak Agus Marif itu Imam Masjid Raya Syekh Zayed, awalnya kita iuran karena nggak dapat dana apa-apa. Terus tapi sampai sekarang kita untuk Ramadan itu menolak bantuan karena udah nggak ada orang yang ngurusi kayak gitu. Jadi membagi makanan 14.000 per hari, mau ditambah lagi kita udah nggak mampu. Ada program sampai Jadi nanti di samping yang disampaikan untuk expand your networks, terus kemudian yang paling mungkin kalau boleh saya tambahi Ustadz Farid itu adalah trust. Ketika trust itu muncul, saya kira ulang itu yang disampaikan Ustadz Farid sama Profesor Nasaruddin Umar itu saya kira kuncinya. orang saya kira siapa yang tidak tertarik dengan wakaf energi. Kalau kita bisa menjelaskan paham. Semua ingin semua happily ever after. Jadi semua pengen hidup bahagia selama-lamanya sampai akhirat. Jika ada tawaran wakaf energi, saya kira itu akan menjadi sebuah tawaran yang indah jika kita bisa menjelaskan dan kita juga bisa meyakinkan bahwa kebetulan karena sekarang itu kan solar panel itu kan sudah mulai efektif, efisien. Meskipun nanti semakin kesini semakin murah nanti solar panel. Cuma sekarang ada permasalahan baterai, makanya yang kalau malam sudah nggak bisa, itu baterai sekarang juga sudah berkembang nanti insya Allah murah. Nah, nanti saya ceritakan di masjid sekarang kita ada prototipe juga untuk pengembangan hidrogen yang bisa diambilkan dari air wudhu. Jadi kita mengundang, harusnya cerita besok ini. Tapi karena ini cerita, jadi kalau hidrogen kan kalau matahari kita masih siang saja karena on grid, nggak punya baterai, yang punya trafo kan hanya PLN. Jadi on grid kita bisanya siang kayak gitu. Nah sekarang ada sumber lagi, ini baru dikembangkan, kita kolaborasi dengan teman-teman di UNS itu untuk hidrogen. Hidrogen itu katanya air laut sama air biasa itu produksi itu kan sumber energi air, jadi ini jadi sumber energi setelah O2-nya dipisah dari airnya akan nanti muncul hidrogen baik cair maupun padat kayak gitu. Itu dikembangkan nanti bisa, siapa tahu air wudhu itu kandungan hidrogennya akan lebih tinggi setelah untuk kumur-kumur itu. Siapa tahu kayak gitu. Tapi ini masih dikembangkan dari teman-teman, ada banyak prototipe jadi untuk menjadi eco friendly saya kira berkembang. Terus kemudian terakhir ini untuk Pak Akmal mana? Because he will answer outside, katanya 2 menit. Sudah, enggak jadi.
On behalf of the government.
Oh iya, he'll answer the.
Yeah,
oh iya, cuma ini untuk manas-manasi dari Bimas Islam aja. Untuk pesantren itu sudah nyumbang saya kira 20 masjid disumbang oleh Kemenak, 20 lebih masjid untuk solar panelnya. Sekarang kita tunggu sumbangan untuk masjid. Akan dijelaskan, mungkin, monggo.
Thank you Pak Munajat, thank you Pak Farid and all the esteemed speakers. Hello everyone, I'm Ina. I'm the Special Staff for International Affairs in Ditjen Bimas Islam. And I'm also happen to be the co-chairs for the International Partnership on Religion and Sustainable Development based in Germany. So now Mora is a part of that partnership, international partnership that consisted more than 171 members from all around the world. Consisted by the governments, multilateral, NGO, FBO, and then civil society organization, and also academia, coming from different perspective, different background, different religions and faith. And what I would like to highlight after this whole discussion is, we as a government, we try to distribute the grant, effectively, but as I know, like some of you guys already implemented the eco-friendly concept without waiting for us as the government. But now is a time for us to synergize more between the government, the FBO, the civil society, and the academia. If we start to work together to pursue the goals, to welcome the future, then we can help you, we can guide you. We can maybe ask, like Mr. Farid mentioned about the work with the embassy, and we can even ask maybe like the grant from other countries, because there's many change, there's many opportunity for us. But what we lack is still, the coordination between the government, the civil society, the faith-based organization, and all of us to work together. So as now we have stronger connection with like the UN agencies. We can just reach out to UNFCCC, UNEP, and if we're speaking about the humanitarian, we can reach out to the UNHCR. And if we talk about the gender equality, we can just reach out to UN Women. We have the connection with them. So we, as the government, we would like to welcome all of you to work with us together stronger so we can work more effectively together. I think that's all, Pak. And it's just a spiel, but I'll be the moderator for the session tomorrow so we can talk more about this eco-friendly concept. And that's all from me. Thank you.
So thank you very much. So this expands what has been explained by Mr. Nasaruddin and also Sheikh Farid. So for this session, let's give applause to our speakers. Yeah. So thank you very much. We'll have a break, and then after the break, we'll start the where? Oh, it will be explained by the next session is parallel sessions from group 1A, 1B, and 1C until Salatul Asri. Yeah. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.